you want to get along, you want to get on with the business of the people. And I understand it correctly that about 75% of some appropriations and such are handled. There's about 25% remaining, but you can't get to it until there is a new House Speaker. If you would, because you are maybe a personal friend and also a supporter of Kevin McCarthy, my question is this: the hardline Republicans who were so against his willingness or necessity to compromise with Democrats in order to avoid thousands of people losing their paychecks, if that's such a bad thing, are they saying that they would have preferred to just let the government shut down?
Well, Karen, it's good to be with you. I think it's important to recognize in this whole process that the people who voted against Kevin McCarthy have 8 different reasons and 8 different thinking patterns. This is not an organized group, and they claim to be concerned about the fiscal situation of the United States. And if they were, Kevin McCarthy would still be Speaker, because over the past 9 months, he's done an outstanding job as the only person in D.C. to propose and then accomplish a debt ceiling deal that resulted in 2024 spending will be lower than 2023 spending, and then $2 trillion of savings over the 10-year period, and capping spending at 1% a year for the next 6 years. So that was the kind of spending constraint that Kevin McCarthy led. So there's a lot of personal vendettas, I think, involved in this. And of course, they've now completely disrupted exactly what they said they were for, which is passing the individual appropriations bills. And you're right, we have over 70% of federal funding now passed all the way through the House committee and across the House floor. We've got about 30% to go. The Senate has done none, and we have a government funding date of November 17th. And yet we cannot function in the House because of what these 8 people did working with the Democrats. They didn't compromise either, obviously.
Right, yes.
And so the American people are really hurt by this. And I think conservatives are hurt by this. There's nothing conservative. You said hard right or whatever. I don't find them hard right. I find them dysfunctional. There's nothing conservative about what's being talked about here.
Back to the House Speaker situation. A couple of people have already put their names in the hat. The next shutdown, as you mentioned, mid-November, what has to happen to prevent a shutdown from actually happening, given the 2 candidates so far? And is there a willingness to compromise with Democrats in order to avoid another? Or is there a way to not have to do that, if that's the preference, without a shutdown? Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's always an ability to avoid a shutdown, and it can be led by Republicans. I mean, essentially, the proposal that passed over the weekend was a Republican House proposal that Republican senators backed in the Senate. It wasn't a Democratic proposal. Democrats voted for it because they didn't have any choice, because leadership of Republicans in the House and Senate created that opportunity to move forward. Why? Because when you shut down the government, it costs the government more. So we send a bill to taxpayers for a government shutdown. This is just a myth that somehow shutting down the government is going to save money or produce a more conservative, meaning politically conservative outcome when we don't control the White House and we don't control the Senate. That's just not a good strategy. And no one was advocating for a shutdown openly in the public. So I think that was the right decision, so that we can work on appropriations bills. And we said a few minutes ago, that's now off track because of throwing Speaker McCarthy out, a bad mistake. If you're for conservative government, lower spending, and Republican leadership, it's really ridiculous.
So do you think we can avoid another shutdown if what has to happen?
We need to go into conference on these spending bills with the Senate and then try to get that agreement for 70% of spending and get that signed into law, and then do the continuing resolution for the 30% that we haven't done and we're still working on, maybe at a 1% cut. So we would fund them for a few weeks at 99% of their 2023 spending level. It's something like that.
Okay.
People are talking. The Senate and the House are collaborating on how to avoid a shutdown while this work's finished. But look, I can't say this more bluntly. Kicking McCarthy out of office is going to make that harder. And I'll just leave it at that.
Because you cannot get to the business of the people without a House Speaker, correct?
Right. It is unconstitutional. We may not go to the House floor and conduct business without a duly elected Speaker.
So when do you see that vote happening? And is there a deadline for such a thing?
There is no deadline, so let that sink in for a minute. But obviously, people want to move as quickly as possible. The House members are talking among themselves this weekend, and then we will meet on Monday for a conference call and lay out the election framework, and then we'll meet on Tuesday and debate that and hope that we can elect a speaker Tuesday or Wednesday, but we'll see what happens.
Well, a lot of folks might say that you yourself, given your background and also having been with a couple of administrations, are quite qualified to be a House Speaker. Have you considered yourself?
Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing the conversation on Monday and Tuesday because I do consider this race open.
Yes.
I don't consider it ironclad. I've got two of my friends that have announced that they're running. Jim Jordan,
right,
very well-known member of Congress from Ohio. He chairs the Judiciary Committee. And then, of course, one of America's heroes, Steve Scalise, who's our majority leader, who's from Louisiana. But my point is, there's a lot of pain out of what happened this week. I tell people they look at Congress maybe as just something that they don't really fully understand. But think of it as a family of 222 people, or a school, or a church family, where you have a tragedy inside that group, and then you're supposed to spring back 24 hours later and go on about your business. Well, it just doesn't work like that. It's a human endeavor. So I think next week is a very, very important week for conservatives in America and for Republicans in the House. And I want to make sure we get it done right. But I think Jim and Steve are excellent candidates. I think there could be discussion where you could see additional candidates. There are other people making phone calls. So we'll see what happens next week.
Do you think there will be a vote by the end of next week so that we can get on with this business of the rest of the people's?
I can assure you that is everybody's intention. But I also know, having served for a few years now here, that you've got 50% of the Congress that has never been in the majority. So this is a new thing for them. And secondly, 60% of the people who I serve with today were not here the day I was sworn in. I know people talk about I know people talk about term limits a lot, and I agree. I understand that. And the terms are set in the Constitution. It would take a constitutional amendment. But my point is, turnover in Congress is pretty high. I mean, it's very high. The average person probably serves maybe between 5 and 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years. So that slows down the process too, as members have to deal with.
Retrain and yes. Congressman, let's talk about the rhetoric. The rhetoric is ugly. It is no holds barred. And those of you now who are on a 1-week recess are being criticized by this congressman in particular for having taken a week off when matters are so pressing. Some might argue they wouldn't be so pressing had he not pushed to remove the Speaker of the House. The rhetoric in general is getting ugly. To just a viewer at home, you want to wonder what is happening to the Republican Party, and what would you respond to that with?
Well, I think the Republican Party has the same sound fundamentals that it's had since Abraham Lincoln was our founder, and over the past certainly 60 years that we've stood for smaller, more accountable government, federalism, where we want states and local governments to solve problems, not everything going to the federal government. strong leadership internationally, and fighting people who would do harm to our system.
Sure, but I'm talking about this infighting.
But look, the rhetoric on both sides of the aisle in the 9 years I've served has really deteriorated, and I get the frustration people have. But of course, the only reason that we're shut down this week is because of Matt Gaetz. There's no other person responsible for it. There's no other person that's told more misleading nonsense for the past few months. Every assertion he's made about Kevin McCarthy on the House floor or the process here over the past 9 months is a complete fabrication. And 96% of the Republicans in the House agree with me. 96% voted to keep McCarthy as Speaker. Only 8 people work with Democrats to remove him for their own selfish reasons. I still stand with, generally, I try to keep my temper and my cool. It doesn't always work. But look.
It's been said that when French Hill gets mad, now we need to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard that last week, maybe from a few people. Yes. But look, Jack Kennedy, made a great comment in his inaugural, which is there's no sign of weakness in civility. You can absolutely rule the day with your argument. And so I don't believe we need to have this vitriol like we've seen hurled at the Republican leader, who is the one person challenging and countering the Biden agenda out there. If you're a conservative, you don't like what the Biden administration's doing. And even if you like some of what the Biden administration is doing, you can't argue with me that pulling up out of Afghanistan was a failure, that he hasn't demonstrated any kind of real international policy to counter China, and the border is a disaster. So, we need a vigorous opposition party here in Washington to offer an alternative.
Yes, and let's talk about the election, because Joe Biden is the candidate of choice for the next election. President Trump is in legal wranglings, but he is considered the front runner in the polls. What are your overall thoughts on where this election is going and where it will end up?
Well, I've said, even going back to 2016, can't the Republican and Democratic parties have an expanded list of qualified candidates that could run? I think President Trump did many strong and effective things in his 4 years in office, but you have to say to yourself, do we not have anyone under 65 years old in both of the Democrat and Republican Party that would be a vigorous candidate? And I want the best candidate that can beat Joe Biden, and I'd love a candidate that can serve 8 years. Because we need to reboot our Republican leadership base across the country. We've got obviously 80 million people or thereabouts, round numbers, that support a center-right approach to governing. And we need a standard bearer that could not only beat Joe Biden, definitively beat Joe Biden, but also, in my opinion, serve 8 years. I think that would be very important to our party's development and our party's success. But I do think we can win the Senate back this year. I think we have some great candidates. I think the Democrat candidates are struggling in the Senate. And my main focus is winning the House and holding the House. And that's going to be very, very challenging under the circumstances right now. We're not doing ourselves any favor right now.
Lastly, we here in Arkansas just want your overall perspective on how our governmental administration is going. There seems to be a lack of transparency that's resulted in a new special session on the FOIA Act and how it works and what it limits. And Governor Sanders' family and security is very important. She must be protected, of course. But there's actually a lawsuit in effect right now related to the purchase of a podium. I'm not sure if you're hearing much about that up there. I mean, I know you're up in Washington still. Are you aware of it? What are your thoughts in general for the state of Arkansas?
Well, I'm certainly aware of it because I proudly digitally read the Arkansas Democrat Gazette every morning.
I would hope so.
But I have to tell you, in the face of war in Europe, an unsecure border, a bad economy, and a house without a speaker, it's a little hard for me to look above the fold on the front page and see a full color picture of a podium. I don't really,
yeah,
I don't really get that. But look, the FOIA Act in Arkansas is part of our cultural tradition in Arkansas. We're very proud of our 50-year tradition there. So I know how sensitive it is. I certainly support the Freedom of Information Act in the state. And I also support Governor Sanders and her efforts to lead our state. So I'm sure all this will get worked out in the right way.
Yes. Okay. And now your turn. Tell us what you're up to. Well, we know what you're up to, but just anything you'd like to say, Congressman, that I didn't give you time for or didn't address.
No, well, Karen, thanks for having me. You know, I work on, my life is kind of organized in two ways. First, I'm working with my county judges and mayors about priorities they have and how I can help at the federal level for them on those. And also then what am I doing legislatively? So let me take Arkansas first. Working with Congressman Bruce Westerman of the 4th District to expand the Flatside Wilderness area out in Perry County. This is in the Ouachita National Forest. This is in keeping with the goal Governor Sanders has of expanding tourism opportunities and raising the profile of Arkansas. So that's one of my priorities in the rest of this Congress. Also, opening up 1,000 new acres for development at the Port of Little Rock is something that I've devoted a lot of hours to, working with Jay Cheshire at the Chamber of Commerce and Brian Day at the Port of Little Rock. We're very close to getting that done with the Federal Aviation Administration, where we have to have their cooperation. But we hope to make that announcement in 2024. And then you may note that I've written HUD about what their role is in investigation and oversight in this very significant crisis I think we're having in Little Rock with the Metropolitan Housing Authority. Our citizens need answers and transparency there, and our residents in these facilities don't need to have any mismanagement of our public housing resources, either in a development or through the voucher program. So I'm very eager to have HUD's answer to my questions.
Yes, and HUD was very critical of some of the lack of transparency, I guess you could say, with the commission. Yeah. So you are keeping your eye on that, I can tell, and you want to see the outcome. Final thoughts before we go on when you might resume the business of the people and get the last 25% or 20% of that done?
Well, my goal is to hopefully have a speaker elected next week. That's the objective of our conference. And anybody who has questions about spending, appropriations, the speaker issue, Karen, you know, they can just email me at hill.house.gov. We'll try to get them a prompt answer. And we're so grateful for the chance to be with you.
And I can't help but ask, why not a House Speaker, Hill?
Well, I am a busy camper on House Financial Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And so really, I've got to defer to that decision to my colleagues.
Understand. Thank you, Congressman.
Happy to be with you. See you.
Okay, bye-bye.